So this song, Worlds Away, I'm just going to talk a little bit about how I came around to writing the song. It started out as an instrumental, of course, and I only showed it to Kara when the song was totally done. And I was in the studio with Kara, and she helped me out with the, arranging, and her boyfriend and producer, Raid Stefan, also contributed a little bit to this track. So, as you can see here in Ableton, it says the file title is like Worlds Away 3 minute slow rise because the original song was over 6-7 minutes long. Just because I wanted to make a really nice cinematic song like that. But of course, we had to cut it down because we wanted to put it out as a single, and no one really puts out 6 minute singles. I would love for that to change, but until then, that's the reality of the business. But anyway, so this song to me, let me just play it as I talk through. It's a lot of atmospheres, textures, little weird glitches. As you can see, there's a lot of audio because that's personally to me that's the best way I work. Like what is this? Oh, so these are little soft synths recorded off by Prophet. To be honest, any plugin could do this. So I'm going to talk about the how I got to this track. It really started with I think this chord progression. And this is a very simple strategy for just making good sounding chords or starting notes. You have the root note of the bass and then the third on top of that. So it's, you can make progressions pretty easily. And I think if you're not really strong in chord theory, music theory, I think that's a pretty easy way, like 2 note chords. All you need is the root and the third. Of course, this pad, where is this pad? So Omnisphere. So personally, I'm not the best guy at sound design, right? I did not come from a bass music background or anything like that. So my favorite plugins are really sample based or preset based. And I think like my strengths come in layering them, in arranging them, and getting the whole thing to sound good. So every producer has their strengths and weaknesses, and just play to those really. Let me talk about the chords a bit more. Let me explain my template. This might be a little confusing with all the colors and all that, but what I'm really trying to do here is have as few tracks as possible going to the master. It really helps with mastering and just keeping everything low and tight. So what I do here is right at the top, so this is Ableton, this is my all synths bus. So all the soft synths you hear in this project go through this one channel. And I'm free to put effects on this channel to tame it. So at the end of the project, there's only 3 or 4 audio tracks going to the master, and it really helps with leveling and just keeping everything nice and tight. Same thing for drums. All my drums are in this bus, so if I just play it, along with the bass. So the kick and the bass, they're a little bit more complicated. Well, I wouldn't say complicated, but so this is my all sub bus. I'll explain my sidechain in a bit, but all the subs in the song, basically everything below 100 hertz goes through this bus, or this track. So we have this Reese, and you see this all sub is in a group with the kick, right? So this group is called the kick and sub group, and it's really heavily limited with an old school Melda production limiter. If you were making music in like 2012, 2013, you would be familiar with any of their products. So very harsh limit curve to just crush everything together. And then once more in the all drums channel. So essentially I'm double limiting the drums, especially the kick and the sub, to really get them nice and tight and make sure there aren't too many transients, because usually in electronic music, the kick is, more often than not, the loudest part of the song. Same thing for the snares. One danger you might run into by using this technique is that snares aren't allowed to be that loud because since the sub takes up basically all of the the available space for limiting because sines and subs are they just take up more space in the loudness spectrum. Your snares might start to crackle if you're pushing these limiters too hard. So let me talk a little bit about the snares I use in the song. There's a lot of drums in here, right? If I play this drum bus, hello from Singapore. Oh, yo, what's up, man? Good morning. I have a little okay, these are my drums, right? So I could have easily used a loop. I could have easily used, like any kind of low pass loop, but I knew what kind of sound I wanted to go for, like a very tribal syncopating drum rhythm. So I just effected a bunch of audio tracks myself. So this isn't the best practice, but my kick and snare are on the same channel, and small EQ to just have them simulate a radio frequency alongside like 10 other tracks of audio. Again, we have an Oliver sample pack, and looking back at the at the final product of the song, like when it's pushed to Spotify and all that, like a majority of people will not pick these out, but the thing is they would notice if it weren't there. So for me, less is more, but I like to fill out the spectrum with as many little loops as sounds as possible. Same thing with white noise. If you're listening to a piano song, and usually if the piano is recorded in a live environment, there's natural white noise to it. And if you take that white noise out, it gets really creepy and quiet. So in a similar sense, with electronic dance music, a lot of people like having simple tracks that are maybe like 20, 30 tracks maximum. But when you add these little things like textures, atmospheres, white noise, which there is a lot in this song, like especially like tonal white noise like this is a reverse chime, right? And it really fills up the spectrum, well, to me. So that's it for basically the drum. ARP that I put in. This is Sylenth. So personally, I only use like three plugins: Massive, Sylenth, and Omnisphere. And I I don't use any other plugins, but that is offset by the fact that I can make almost any sound I can think of in Sylenth. And I feel like it's a lot better to know one plugin inside and out than to know five that you're not really that great with. So a little ARP here. Oh, oops. Here. Little distortion, little portamento going on. And I picked a progression that was, that fit all the chords. And usually any progression in the pentatonic scale does that. The pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale within any key that fits really well with any kind of major progression, which is, so this art came from that. I cannot talk a lot about that because most of the compression and the effecting was really done out of Kara's end. But I can tell you what went on in that session. Basically, she had a really fancy mic, the Sony C800, which I think is over 10 grand or something. Not that you have to have one of those, but what I thought was really cool was that most of the effects were outboard. So, for example, your Apollo 8, your Apollo 16s, and they just printed this vocal without any external effects on it. So basically, she recorded it, and that's how it printed on a song, because she had a little bit of reverb, a little compression on the vocal. And usually, if you're excuse me, if you're working with a singer, if you're working with someone that records as you produce, a little bit of reverb and compression can really help make the recording better by just making them more comfortable in the space. And of course, that goes without saying. If you're a singer as well, you've noticed that you usually perform better with.
Make your music stand out, get more views, and way more engagement. Bring your music to life. Get Music Visualizer in every format, even for social media. Get started today. The link is in the description.
With a little bit of reverb, a little bit of compression to sparkle it up. But for me, I didn't do much. I didn't do a lot of processing on the final vocal. Really just some de-essing.
It's my imagination. Did I see you on the coast?
Some EQing.
You were standing in the water, but you're not getting any close.
And some automating of this altar boy, which I do later. So the essence of the song is really this progression, right? This bell progression, like. And obviously, some of the inspirations behind the song were from this act called Tourist, that uses a lot of complex instrumentals that are just laid with the most beautiful ambiances and textures and atmospheres, and just having a very simple melody. And that's what I wanted to do for this song. Like, that contrast really shows, having a huge, lush landscape, soundscape of sound. If everything is complicated, then nothing is complicated. So what I wanted to do with this part was, strip it down to its essentials, have just the lead, have just very stripped down production, and that's what you hear. Now, going through the songs in this, the sounds in this section, it all started with this sample, right? If I play the sample, it probably sounds nothing like it. So this is a very, how would I describe this? Like an ethnic sounding pilog or a gong, and I cut it up to have this little melody. And that's what started the song, really. I really like the harmonics, and sometimes, you really can't get that kind of sound with a synthesizer or a plugin. So that's why I like using samples, because you get a lot of weird, quirky effects when you pitch them around, slow them down, change the tempo and BPM. and and it worked out well here because when I stretched them, some harmonics really came out. You get some weird like fifth and seventh harmonics in there. And of course, I layered it with straight up just bell sound in Omnisphere. And that's what contributes to the, like the sandiness of, or the windiness of it. All this air comes from a layer in Omnisphere. So the original bell did not have this layer, I think, but in most sample bass. Okay, yeah, this one. I took off all the there are like a million presets in Omnisphere, and basically tweaking any one of them can get you a very record-ready sound. So what I did was basically turn up the portamento, so you get that gliding sound. Put some reverb on it. I think, yeah, Valhalla Room, excellent reverb, go-to for almost every other track that I insert into Ableton, and some transient shapers which help with the pluckiness of it. This one is from Waves. It's called Trans X. Do I do a lot of processing in Omnisphere? Not really, not that much. Most of the processing I do is outside, so like very severe EQing. Sometimes I play around with the Wave Shaper, or like any of these little plugins here in the oscillator. So Wave Shaper is like a little distortion. You can add some unison to your leads with this. And there's a granulizer or granulator in Omnisphere that is very cool, but it also melts my CPU. So I try not to use that too much. But in essence, when I'm making music, I try not to spend too much time in getting the perfect sound. What I want to do is create the perfect song by having a lot of imperfect elements. So I think it's more important to have like 10 decent tracks, maybe in a course of an hour, than really spend 1 hour just EQing a kick or EQing a lead, because that really gets you nowhere. For me, I feel like having simple sounds is best, but that's just me. If you're making different kinds of music, obviously there are different demands. Like if you're making dubstep or bass music, obviously you would have to have more think into what kind of sounds you're designing, etc. So right up to the drop, just recorded a little. I just recorded the first note of the drop and just reversed it for that little, atmosphere. You have a very simple kick and snare pattern. Let me just go through that real quick, along with how I do my sidechain. Of course, this is just one way to sidechain kicks and drums to your mix. You don't have to follow this. I'm just showing you what I do. Okay, so this kick has like no processing on it. It is an Oshi kick. I like it because it's low and blocky, and that's all I need. And of course, I layer it after with like a heavier sounding kick, like that. With the Oshi kick, keeping that low end and putting on top, stacking on top of that, just a vinyl sounding organic kick, and also a corpus here to help with just giving it some harmonic or melodic element to kind of cut through the mix. I'm not sure if it really does anything, but it gives it the nice little twang, which I guess helps in the big picture. Alright, so how I do my sidechain is everything is MIDI. Like, I know some people like their drums in audio, so they could see the kicktails and all that, but I'm pretty well versed in simpler. I can pretty much tell how much 304 milliseconds is with regards to a kicktail, or like a decay, an attack. So I like having my drums in audio because I can switch them out at any time I want, and I'm usually very indecisive about my drums until the last minute. So I like to have that option instead of copying and pasting across every single track. So this sidechain over here, it's MIDI, and I duplicate the kick track and send it to the sub. So usually I don't sidechain my sub to the snare, but I mean, yeah, I don't do that. So here is the kick trigger, and it sends a signal to this track, right? This track right here, all sub, and it sends it to the LFO tool of that channel. So if you scroll down right here, there is a LFO tool that triggers every time this MIDI gets inserted. So cool, I did the same thing for the sidechain. It sends a MIDI signal to SC, the LFO tool there, and it sidechains the synths of the song. And I like this method because it lets me control, how steep I want the curve to be. If I want it to have like a huge, gasping kind of feel, I can lower the rate to here and it'll sound like this. Which is, great for a certain type of song. How would I advise so I'm just looking at questions in the chat, so at any time just feel free to drop any questions about what I'm doing, or if there's a particular part of the song that you want me to go through, feel free. How would I advise a future bass producer trying to sound unique within the genre? Well, it's not something I consciously think about, but I think one thing that really helps me is just having a very diverse list of influences. Like, I was a big music fan before I became a producer, so that helps. I take a lot of inspiration from indie acts, electronic acts, like main stage EDM acts, and I just take little bits of that that inspire me, that influence me, and try to make something that I really enjoy. I think the most important part is that when you're having fun when you're producing, that's usually a sign that what you're making is original and precious to you, I guess. Okay, let me talk about the sub a little bit. Simple 808. When I say simple, I really mean simple. It's just an 808 with some EQing. Just reversed or something. But it was in key, or I pitched it into key, and it just, brought the track onto the next level. And a lot of my production is like that, just dragging samples, recording my own samples. If I search Atmos, it would have just different tracks of the air around my house, which I feel, adds that nice little organic touch. Like, electronic music nowadays is very quantized, and I'm just trying my best to take it out of there. We have some little vocal chops over here. Great plugin, really low in the CPU load. Crazy wacky EQ curve. Some reverb. What else is in here that's interesting to talk about? So more synths from the Prophet, and these are two note chords, very simple, and they're just very strong to the ears because I don't know, it's like a natural ratio that makes people think like, hey, that sounds nice. You don't have to be overcomplicated with your chords at all, like even for here, you know, and that's just enough. Yo, what's up? Is there a reason I use Pro Q over EQ8? I think it's because I have that one-click solo option. I think. I don't know if so. If I'm listening to a song, a track, I can just press this part and see which bands need the most EQing. And I think in EQ8 it's like 2 clicks or something like that. I also like Pro Q because I came from FL Studio, and so like parametric EQ was very visual to me. EQ8 just looks a little stale. That's really it. I mean, if you use EQ8, that's fine. That's great. It doesn't really make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. Hi-hat pattern stolen from Electric Mantis, I think. And there's this one thing I'd like to show you that's really interesting to me. This drum loop, it's originally just a bongo loop, right? If I turn everything off, play this, or I just... So the first time I heard this sample, I was like, it's a little tonal. What if we turn it into a synth? So, I EQ'd it, put some distortion, phaser, and I turn it into, a melodic instrument. You can really hear it in the background. Like dun 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 dun. So it's just a little surprising thing that came from trying to have more drum loops. I had a little synth element now. How I did that was EQing, distortion, really simple stuff. I'm just re-singing the words, it's not you, it's me. And they're processed in a way that's just very distant, very sheltered, very reverbed out. And they're auto-tuned to death. I think this was one of the first songs where I tried singing on my own. And I just wanted to have that, my own touch of that song in there. You can see that this EQ, or like this effect chain, is just huge and long. But I want to talk about some of my favorite vocal plugins that could help you in your quest if you ever want to try out singing, or if you ever comp for a singer. So I know the profile of my mic is very low end heavy. So there's a little notch here that just not a notch, a little shelf here that just takes away pressure from that. And our Vox, Renaissance Vox, a great simple compressor. So I have like 6 dBs of gain reduction, which is just enough. Distortion, de-esser, chorus, delay, kind of self-explanatory. Second EQ to just make sure that... So this is stylistic, like I didn't want too much high frequencies, I didn't want too much low frequencies in there. So I think, yeah, it's like a little duet call and response type thing with Kara. What else is going on? Can we see that ARP? Yeah, for sure, man. So this ARP over here plays over that whole thing. Simple ARP. I could try to remake it, if you want. Oh god. So the important part about that ARP was the portamento, I feel. So if I turn this up. And I think I had a little cutoff on there or something. So this is a little cutoff envelope. Low pass on this. And distort the whole thing. And delay it. So like that kind of gets it like halfway there. Let me just undo that and see what I actually did. Oh, well, it looks like I've lost the patch, but that's pretty much it. Portamento, some kind of cutoff envelope, and yeah, I think it sounds kind of similar. And I remember spending a lot of time on the Reese. I think that little Reese, little bass you hear. Yeah, just huge. I don't know. Strange chain over here. So silent as well. Just I think a low pass super saw. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Low pass. So just turn that filter down. Put an amp on it. OTT. Some EQ. Bring out those lows. And here I switched up the progression because it's a little fatiguing to just listen to the same progression the entire song. So I had a little like dun dun dun, like ascending progression here. Orchestral drums. I forgot what I did for this, but basically tons of samples. Taiko. Yeah, just layers and layers and layers. And when you play everything, no one can really hear what you're doing, so I didn't even know I did this. But it really helps. Like every tiny little bit helps. Just make a song. Okay, so the most obvious part I'm going through would be the lead and the synths. What do I have here? Okay, there's a layer on top of that I recorded with my Prophet that gives, yes, this one, that gives this as it is. I mean, like, gives this song its essence, I feel. And my dumbass recorded in mono. So that's why you hear a little bit of doubling. Some questions. What's my thought process when I use OTT to compress a sound? It's usually because a sound is usually lacking in like either the lows or the highs, and the purpose of OTT is it's over the top, right? It's to just compress all the bands equally or in a very harsh manner to just get that that typical EDM compression sound. When you have a nice pattern of progression, sometimes when you switch it up, it sounds weird. Any tips for transitioning? Well, I think one tip really helps is have have the chords in the same kind of space on the keyboard. Like, don't go an octave up too high, and use maybe a repeating element, like here. So if I look at these parts. So like in between here to here, these are two different chord progressions. This is, like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 or something. 4, 5, 6. What I have is just repeating arps like this on top, repeating elements that give like these four groups form the chord bus. I didn't even know there was a string in there. I couldn't hear that. But these are Ableton strings. You can get these packs, I think, on ableton.com, and they're great. Okay, so the drop for this track, right, is an actual sample. Like the drop synths, they came from a sample because I was going on that theme, which is dragging random shit into my Ableton, and it's right here. If I find it, this is the original. So like when you come across this sample in your sample folder, you're just like, what the fuck is this? I'll probably not use this at all. Especially that, right? But for me, I slowed it down, I pitched it, I gave it some effects, and it sounds like this. Right here. So that's basically it. I think unexpected samples form the best kinds of outcomes. Of course, there are layers on top of that, I think. Well, guess not. It's really just that for the chords. And there are two layers. The first one being the high one, I think. Ooh, that's a little harsh on the ears. It was a little harsh. There's something I noticed. So I layered a low, I think, mono version to kind of get that full stereo spectrum. When you pitch it down, it doesn't become a exact copy of the thing you pitch down. So when you layer them, there isn't like phasing issues and all that. And in Ableton, the complex Pro algorithm is great for pitching things down. Complex Pro, if you want to keep the formants. The formants aren't really important here because So when you layer them, you get this huge wide stereo sound and this mid sound, and that's what usually makes superstars huge, in my opinion. Now let me go through the drop snare, and I think that's pretty much it for Worlds Away. But in the meantime, let me know if you have any other burning desires to see any other part of the track, or any different, segments that you would want me to go through. So here for the snare, I wanted to do something totally different from the first drop snare, which is a little donk here. That's it. Pretty sure you guys have at least like a similar sounding sample in your sample bank. That's it. Like it sounds like a rim with a layer of a snare. But for the second one, I wanted this huge acoustic, like a fat snare. So this is how it sounds. So absolutely disgusting snare. Acoustic snare, very simple. And I use these snares a lot in my songs actually because I don't really like those tiny tonal snares like I don't know, like Skrillex would use or you would find in a cymatic sample pack. But I like organic sounding snares because I don't know. It goes back to the point about just playing off your influences, right? I was a huge emo punk kid growing up, and I just love the sound of like a really well recorded drum set. So yeah, I just took that love to what I do, and you get snares like these, and they're very easy and simple to layer because like they don't sound like a lot of other snares, so you could just layer different sounding snares. So here is what I call the body of when I get to layering snares. This is the body, like a huge thick part which your ears usually pick up, and this is the transient basically. It's the part that helps it cut through the mix, and this one is the small tonal part. If I open this EQ, it's probably this is how I get tonal sounds in my snares. Without this, it just sounds like a regular snare. But here, tune in the key of the track. If you have Pro Q, you could bring up this little piano here, and you can see that this is, where is this? E? Yeah. E, which is the key of the track. Of the song, I think, yeah. And this is the little, I don't know, like the flourishes of the snare. So like it's usually a stereo bit or like a crash or a cymbal, and that's how you get a full layered thick snare. I mean, for certain types of music. Processing, just Saturn on 28%, just a little bit of bite to it. Nothing much, nothing too crazy. EQ, same thing. Boosting that one little melodic element. PC drop synth, drum bus processing. Yeah, sure. On this snare, it's not much. Same thing, just giving it that little high end to cut through the mix. Saturn again. And it goes into the all drums channel. So if we go to that, you'll hear all the drums plus the bass in the song. And there's nothing much going on in terms of like processing. Just a huge limiter. If I turn it off, like you can see that the kick is just huge. And you want something that the kick you want to plug in like a limiter or a compressor to push the kick and the sub to almost kind of the same volume. Especially in music like this where you're compressing everything to bits in the in the master bus. So like step or stage limiting within your project, like from kick to bass, like limit that, and then kick bass sub, limit that, kick bass sub snare, limit that, and then you get this really nice thick sausage that really helps you with mixing. So for me in my master channel, I don't have any multiband compressors. I just have an EQ. I just have a little glue compressor, one tiny limiter to like catch the initial peaks, and then one final limiter just pushing it like 3 or 4 decibels. And that's pretty much it. I don't really use ozone. I don't use multiband compressors, so I don't have a lot of experience in that area. But this works for me. I try to get as close to the pre-master as I can in the mix, As I try to get as close I can to the master in the mix, without using like mastering plugins, and that's always worked for me. If you use a different way, like respect to you. That's like everyone has a different way of making their music sound good. There's no hard and fast rule. Um, Drop synth processing. Yeah, this little lead here. So I have 4 layers. This is the sample layer that I showed you. And then this is Omnisphere for that air. And then a little bell for extra harmonics. You can tell it's not even on key, because I think it's like a third up or a fifth up or something. But it gives you that extra layer. Like it sounds in key when you play them all at once because they're helping each other out. Oh, and here you have a little bell sound. Usually this is just for transients, like to just cut through the mix. Oh, were my plugins behind the camera? Which channel was that? Oh, right, the EQ. There's nothing much on the EQ. Just a little dip at 40, a little bump at 2.5, and there's like I downloaded this EQ because I thought it was really funny how they had a 40K band, right? Like, I don't know if you ever want to make music for your dog, just get this EQ. But what I think it does is has a little gentle slope at 40K, so like all the other bands get pushed up a little bit. Haven't really tried it, so I don't really know, but this is good because I when it comes to mastering, I like keeping things in discrete stages, not like EQs where you can move like a fraction of an inch or like a whole inch. I like having it at -1, 1, so I can do the same settings for each track, and they all come out sounding pretty much the same, and that goes a long way into cultivating a sound for yourself. And if you sorry, if you think about it, a sound is basically a repetition of your habits, of your choices, every time you open a DAW. So getting to a nice, consistent sound just means having consistent habits, and that's worked for me. Okay. Any processing? Nope, just OTT, Valhalla Room, like short little reverb, and Pro Q. Yeah. Mix and master. Yeah, they're always in the same project. The thing is, I don't really master anything. I don't know if you could call putting like 2 limiters on top of each other mastering, but that's what I do. This is a tip which I learned from my friend Crane, Krane, huge producer and good friend of mine. He would just put a limiter at the end of a song, and I would open his projects and like, you didn't master it? He says, it sounds good. If it sounds good in the pre-master, it sounds good to me, and I thought, that's a great philosophy to have. Also, it sucks just having a pre-master in one project and then opening up a new project just to master. So I didn't like that either. So I just have it all in one project. No processing on this bus. Okay. What's my thought process when picking samples and where do we fit in the stereo spectrum? That's a great question. So like if I'm picking samples for like my FX chain or just having stuff in the background, I like something that's wide, for example. Like this pans left and right, and that helps with atmosphere because I don't have to put an extra auto pan on it. If I'm looking for vocals, mono is great. And I pan stuff all the time, I think. Like here, panning. Like left, left, right, right, that little stuff like that. Snares, they get panned too. Really go with what you feel like doing, honestly. I just like having a full stereo spectrum. I think that's pretty much it. Tips for overcoming writer's block, trying to force through it. Well, to be fair, like you're not working a 9 to 5 job, right? You don't have to have a new song at the end of the day or you die. The thing about music is that you are
Make your music stand out, get more views, and way more engagement. Bring your music to life. Get Music Visualizer. In every format, even for social media. Get started today. The link is in the description.
kind of privileged to make music on your own time, on your own schedule. And I think that's what you should do. If you're having writer's block, it just means that you probably have a preconceived notion of what you're trying to make when you sit down at your desk. Like, you're probably thinking, I should make a house song with so and so elements. And then, in the first 5 minutes of like picking samples, you feel like, oh, shit, it's not working out. And then, that self doubt creeps in. So, to be honest, how I combat writer's block is really just only make music when I'm very inspired. And inspired not meaning like I have no an idea of what I'm gonna make that day, but just that I feel good. I've got my exercise for the week. I've been eating healthy. I have a lot of pent up creative energy that I want to spend somewhere, and no better place to spend it than an open project. So I think for me, I try to make music without having any idea of what I'm going to make, because that can definitely hurt the creative process. And secondly, only make music when you feel good. Like if you've been writing music for 8 hours and then you're trying to write some more, I think it's time to take a break. Hang out with family, do something else productive, or not. Take a nap. And usually, within a day or two, it'll work out. Cool. So this is my second track, Higher. Let me just give it a little playthrough. Why? A little bit darker than Worlds Away, and it's a little darker than basically anything that I try to make. The reference for this track was basically The Weekend. I remember I was in a session with Lost Boy, Dylan, and he's a great vocalist, great producer. He's a rapper too. So I floated the idea of, I was just listening to music before the session. So this was the session in the Ultra Studios in LA, maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half ago. And I just said, how about we make a, slow tempo, maybe R&B, or like really, well, okay, the best way to describe it was we wanted to make a song that sounded like The Weekend. That's why you have this little nice, yeah, and we banged this track out in like, I don't know, 2 hours, and I finished it while I was here in Singapore. It's called Higher because there's this sample in the beginning that was, okay, so it starts from here, right? If you've heard the album, you know that this track bleeds into from Hyperviolence. So it's like like a two-part, or the second part of Hyperviolence. And because Hyperviolence used only synths from Higher, Like I didn't make any synths there. It's just chopping up different synths. Um, and it's called higher because there's something called a shepherd's tone in it here, which is a tone that just keeps on pitching up infinitely, forever. I think I got the idea from this film called Dunkirk or something. Yeah, pretty much it. Is this it? Oh well, the shepherd's tone was in the previous song, um, so higher and higher and higher. So very dark song over here. It started with this synth, I think. A little bell sound in Omnisphere, playing with the pitch wheel. 3 notes, simple melody. So before we get in the production, I think these little things, these vocals, form a huge part. So like a little creepy sounding, but the original sample sounds like this, I think. And what I did was Guitar Rig. Guitar Rig is a great plugin for just making anything anything remotely tonal sound very cool and like a guitar basically. So this is my one stop for just putting any kind of vocal through it. And there are tons of I didn't design this speaker stack or amp stack. You could just pick like hundreds of presets, and it helped me get there. So yeah, helps with the ambience, the atmosphere. I don't know where this is from. I just searched Atmos in my sample library and just dragged it in. Yeah. Okay, let me talk a little bit about the production. So we wanted a 4-on-the-4 beat. The snares. And one thing you can hear immediately is that the hats have some kind of tonal element to them. That's because of Corpus. I wanted like a metallic feel to the song. Something that's really ringy and metallic. So Corpus is great for that. I think it's also in the key of the minor of the song. Yeah. Laying here bass, simple Reese. Yeah, nothing much to it. Just a low pass supersaw as usual. I'm 10 times lighter, higher. You drop me off. And same thing, 2-note chords. Like I remember when making this album, I knew like at the time, because I was making a lot of future-based music, it prioritized very complex chords or very like weirdly complex chord progressions, and I thought, like, who am I trying to impress? Majority of people will not care like how many notes I put in a stack. So for the purpose of this album, I stripped everything down bare, and just wanted to make I wanted to make songs that were simple, easy to recreate, easy to sing, and yeah, keep it simple, really. So, Omnisphere, nothing much to it. Basic saw wave, but it just sounds cool to me. Alright, let me hit the drop. Let me let the drop play while I hit the bathroom for a second. let me go through what I did for the drop. Oh yeah, before that, I wanted to have a little guitar sounding synth in here. So I came up with this. I'm pretty sure this is not a guitar. It's a guitarette, whatever that is. Thumb piano that's really heavily distorted, I think, over here. Yeah, just threw these on. This tape slammer really helps. Um, that's a great question. Do I have a go-to method for finding good samples in Omnisphere? Personally, I have, like, I've memorized a couple that I use a lot. For example, if I'm looking for a bell sound, there's this great bell sound that everyone shits on. It's called In Memoriam, and it's just nice and gentle. But I mean, there are categories here, right? And usually when I insert a new sound, I know exactly what I'm looking for. Like a pad, or a synth, I go to, synth poly, synth short. Anything else, I try to make on my own because I know it can be annoying when you're trying to scroll through hundreds of samples. So I think only add a synthesizer like Omnisphere if you know what you're looking for, because I think you can get into option paralysis by just looking at the infinite number of samples you have and just struggling to choose one of them. But okay, so for here, this is the only time I've used Serum once in my life. I'm not a huge Serum fan, but I used it for this song. Okay, so right here we have the synth, the lead synth for the drop. Which is just a walk-in, a root note with a fifth harmonic over it. So yeah, +7 semitones is a fifth. And this is a sine wave. And I remember, I was trying to do some FM type stuff. That didn't really work out, so I went to AM. I have no really, like, to be honest, I have no idea what that means because I'm not a bass music producer and this is my background. But I wanted to make a song that sounded like Flux Pavilion, but with LFOs. If you listen to any of his old songs, you have this huge wall of sound that has, stacks of harmonics on it. And I just wanted to do the same thing. So little LFOs like here. And then automating the frequency in which they oscillate at. So if I go here and just search, press A, automation, yeah, that's what you get. So the LFO2 rate is being automated right here. So the rate, I assume, it goes slower, like. And I'm also automating the cutoff to have it, sound more organic, just weave in and out, really. And a second layer of just weird harmonics, which I thought would sound great on top of it. So this is it soloed. So of course this was a duplicate of the previous one, and just made little changes, have it an octave higher, and that's what you get. In terms of processing, there's not much on it. I think a simple Camel Crusher, which is a great distortion plugin. I think it's basically one of the less crazy presets. British Clean. Here, same thing. Yeah, just cut out some plugins. And on the bus, there's nothing. It goes to all synths as usual. But obviously, this isn't the part that makes or break the song. Makes or breaks the song. It's really to me, it's really the percussion and the things that happen in between that make the loudest bits shine. So that bass is crazy on its own. So basically, a duplicate of the previous two serums, but with just the sub. And a snare that goes really loud on the third and fourth hits, like these ones, third, fourth. Yeah, pretty much it. How did I do that? If I search, there should be something automated. I think it's Valhalla. Yeah, the mix. So here, yeah. So it gives that, the dynamic feeling. And the snare is pretty weird in itself too. So you have this, which is the body of the snare. I think it's also the same snare in the intro, so continuity. Here, simple, wide sounding snare. You can tell it's really wide. Here, a weird snare, because I think what I tried to do with the song was use unorthodox samples. Use samples that usually won't find their way into a pop track like this. Yeah, so I ended up with that. The snare, like a really thick, again, stereo here. So simple Hass effect. Delaying one channel of audio will give this huge stereo sound. And of course, having it layered together with a simple limiter here. Just in a really heavy clip setting. And once again here in all drums. I said earlier that I used to use FL Studio. Why did I switch to Ableton? I switched because I remember just getting into a lot of collabs at the time, right? And also, I think I hit a brick with how creative I could get in FL Studio. One thing FL Studio prioritized was the ability to synthesize music, because almost all of their, like a huge portion of their plugins, like Harmor, Harmless, Citrus, I still can remember all those names, are based on you creating synths on your own, or you creating patches on your own. And I like that, and I was kind of good at that because I was making electro complextro. But one thing that really sucked in FL was finding samples. Like, I would download tons of sample packs, and it would be 2 to 3 weeks before I scrolled down and be like, oh, I have this sample pack. So I heard that Ableton was great with just dragging stuff, and I love sample-based music. So that was one of the reasons why I switched. The second reason was that all of my friends on SoundCloud used Ableton, and if I wanted to collaborate with them, it was really hard in FL. So with Ableton, I could just send over the project, and yeah, things would be a lot easier there. Okay, right here we have a lot of weird percussion, which I think contributes to the, the ebb and flow of this track. So you have a huge white noise stab, and this little glitchy sound in place of a ride. Yeah. It's a little laser power up sound. It wouldn't be the same song without the vocals, right? So this little harmony, Dylan came up with that on his own. Like, I thought the job was going to be empty, but I sent this to him, and he came back with all these crazy stacks and layers. Let me just solo them. So very cool. I didn't have to do any work on that. There's also very little processing on that. Just a chorus, simple chorus, and decapitator, which is a great saturation slash distortion plugin if you're looking to make your songs, you know, or if you're looking to put some interesting effects on a vocal, on a sample. I recommend that. Basically, all of the Sound Toy stuff is great. I use Crystallizer a lot. It's a kind of a grain delay. Yeah, and so I cut out this part from the acapella and distorted it and put some LFO tool on it. Dimension Expander, which is a free tool from Xfer. Yeah, it just widens the sound. Usually I don't put the size up. Like this is a little trick someone showed to me. Have the dry wet at half, have the size at 0, and just it gives it that huge, that widening without the doubling. Because if I turn the size up, it doubles. Which is a little messy for mixing, so I keep it like that. Same thing, Decapitator, Little Altar Boy, which is also a Sound Toys plugin. I just dipped the formants, so it sounds a little robotic, sounds a little effective. That traditional, radio effect, like a traditional vocal altering effect you would hear on the radio. Turn it down. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And over here, in place of hi-hats, we have these weird little stabs, which I put in there because I just wanted to have a weird feel of the song. I think it worked. Yeah. These are from a sample pack called SM Glitches, or GM, Glitch Machines. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Glitch Machines, but they're I think a sample company, and they put out really crazy packs. So yeah, put that in. Beat. I think, yeah, this little half kick idea came from, I think, a Weekend or like a Daft Punk song. With this. Where is the snare? Here. Yeah. I think a general tip when it comes to just curating your own sample library, if you're a pop producer, don't just have pop samples. If you're a future-based producer, don't just have cymatics future-based samples. It pays off to just have samples from all kinds of places. Like if you look at my library right now, tons of very weird stuff going back to like 2014, Vengeance stuff, EDM stuff, Kirby samples. So like really weird different things, and they all help each other out. Like I think all these samples came from the time when I was a kid making like drum and bass or neurofunk, and that helped. Yeah. With these vocals, I had to process them myself, so I thought, yeah, this would be an interesting time to talk about how I process my vocals. So if I took off all the processing, if I played it, you can tell there's still a little bit of compression, and that came from the Ultra Studios because I think they had a vocal compressor rack just built into the studio mic. So that's why it already sounds good out the box. But not good enough for radio, so I had to do some stuff to it. Take me higher. You drop me off on another world. I'm 10 times lighter. the first thing I did was obviously EQ it.
Take me higher.
I noticed that it was a little too
Drop me
much in the
off
high
on
end too.
another world.
So don't be afraid to cut out your high
Sometimes
end.
lighter. You send me right.
And the great thing nowadays is that with Pro Q3, let me just search that up. Pro Q3 lets you have, I think this has been a feature in Pro Multiband, but Pro Q3 lets you have dynamic EQ, which works in the same way as a multiband compressor.
Take me higher. But you take me higher. You drop me off on another world. I'm 10 times
So let's say I'm not happy with how the S's sound here, right?
another world. I'm 10 times another world. I'm 10 times lighter. I'm 10 times
Right here. Usually I would do this, before Pro Q3.
I'm 10 times lighter.
But when
You send
the S's don't show up there, you are taking a fundamental part of the vocal away. So now the crazy thing is you could just right click, make dynamic, and it works like a compressor.
I'm 10 times lighter.
So it only ducks when
Send
the
me
vocal goes
right up.
above that section, which I think is
The harder
crazy
let
for
the weed
vocal
fall.
production.
You could
And my new songs like Fear with Manila Killa use the same kind of effect. So result was like a really clean, surprisingly clean vocal. How do I find balance without layering so many sounds, without having a busy mix? I think when I add a new sound to the mix, I know which group it belongs to. If I drag a sample, I'm like, okay, this belongs to the vocal group, which belongs to the synth group. Or if I drag in a kick or like a percussion, I think, oh, this belongs to the perc group, which belongs to the drum group. So every element is it belongs to a group, which is a subset of many groups. Yeah, and each one of them has their distinct place in the spectrum. Like if I scroll up and go to all synths, there's a simple cutoff there.
I'm 10 times lighter.
And if I go to synth main, like I know this takes up, like the main synths of the song, so I don't really cut them out or anything. Here, other groups. OTT.
Make your music stand out, get more views, and way more engagement. Bring your music to life. Get Music Visualizer. In every format, even for social media. Get started today. The link is in the description.
So like I do a lot of EQing, like every other track. Like I know this part. Like I'm only interested in this part of the sound. Like if I open it up, I mean, it sounds cool, but there's a lot of unnecessary frequencies in there. So I cut out the bass, cut out the tops, and it still keeps the essence of the sound. So I think one thing that's really cool to know, or one thing that's good to keep in mind, is that when someone listens to your sound, listens to your song, they're not picking out each individual element. They're only hearing like the most prominent frequency of each element, and that makes a song. So don't be afraid to cut out unnecessary elements like the low ends in vocals or the really high parts of a drum, like most of the body in hi-hats, for example. So like the culmination of all the most prominent frequencies of each separate sound make a song to me. So to me, yeah, I do a lot of subtractive EQing, and that's how I get that's how I'm able to layer like as much as I want without having a busy mix. Yeah. All right, back to the vocals here.
Take me high.
And after that, simple de-esser, because I think I was still having some problems with the S's in the song.
Take me high.
This de-esser is from Waves. Same thing. I think pretty cool. Just one slider type thing.
Take me higher.
You could also change the frequency in which it starts cutting off.
Take me higher.
After that, it's RVox,
Take me.
which really helps with the compression. It's also a gate here.
Take me higher. You drop.
So if you're ever doing stuff for radio, if you're recording a podcast, that's just great to slap on.
Take me higher. You drop me off on another world. I'm 10 times lighter. You send me.
I find sometimes when I'm trying to stack sounds, I EQ them so much that they lose their fullness and fundamental sound. I think it just comes with practice. Like if you're trying to make a good synth stack, you have to know that it's not all just supersaws and soft synths. It's also basses like notes playing, the lowest note. There's also atmospheres. There's textures. So maybe definitely look into like noise and other elements to help you make that sound good. Because like with many songs, if you solo something, it just doesn't sound as good as it does in the mix, and usually it's the mix that gives it its fullness. So it comes down to just picking good parts that help complement the sound you're trying to make, and I think that helps you get a full sound. And also really just practice, a lot of practice, just making music with different kinds of samples, I suppose, different kinds of genres.
You drove me off on another world.
Another EQ here.
You drove me off on another world.
Reverb.
I'm 10 times lighter.
Oops.
You send me right up. And the harder left that we fall, you could have my heart.
And some delay that gets automated, I think. Yep, it does. If I show where the automation is. Here, yeah. You always have to have like 1,000 elements in your song. Yeah. Yeah. Does anyone do you guys have any questions about music in general, or any of my songs, or any of my habits really? I'm open. I think we are yeah, I think I'm done with these two songs. There's nothing else I want to talk about, unless there's something you have in mind.
Time.
Heavy dip around 3-4K. Yeah. I remember just soloing each band. And this is like the nasal part of the vocal that I'm not really a fan of. Or it could be a quality of the mic. So like depending on your recording situation, depending on how you get the vocal, or depending on how a person sounds, there's always a part that could be fixed. Or like EQ'd a little better, not fixed. I mean.
Off on another world. I'm 10 times lighter. You send me.
If it's applicable, could you show your mid-side EQ and your synth bass group? Okay, so the thing about my bass is that it's usually in mono, I like to think. Is this in mono? Yeah, it sounds like it's mono. So I have a sub. Like every time I have a bass element in my songs, I always have a sub playing the same notes in the same like LFO style, layered on top of the bass synth. So you can tell that this is very stereo. There's an there's FX on it. Hyperdimension, yeah, that's probably what gives it that stereo-ness. So I think that also helps me with getting a really full sound. Having the bass in mono right here, always in mono. And what that means is that you can just go ham with your synth stacks, because your bass is already accounted for. Your bass and your kicks in mono, the low end is in mono, and that really helps with the stereo imaging of the sound. EQ, I don't think there's any mid-side EQ on this. For some reason I dipped this. Oh, it's probably because of this. So that was a little loud and annoying. And I bumped this up because I think the harmonics are there. Yeah. That's it. How do I do song structure? In general, I think well, like for the kind of music I make, it's very quantized music. So like every 8 bars or every 16 bars, depending on how you count them, there's a change. And you know, changes usually lead to just going to the different parts of the song really. So you can see here I have different parts. Like it starts the intro, and then it goes to the verses. This is like 8 bars or something. Yeah. After that's pre. Song structure just comes down to practice, keeping in mind like how long you want a song to be. This is a very short song. It's like 2 minutes and 45. So very short. It could be longer, but I just wanted to make a short song. Really comes down to practice and preference. After a while, you'll know like how long a job needs to be, and I think one thing that really helps is just dragging full completed songs into your DAW of choice, and just like putting in markers like every time you hear a change in the song. So yeah, like you could do that, and then after a while you might get accustomed to just being better with structure in your mixing and producing. What does the bass mono button do? It does the same thing as this. I think it's really just a button. The bass mono versus a mono. So bass mono just makes everything below this frequency mono. So you can see this frequency is like 100. So everything below 100 is mono. I'm not sure why I did that, because the entire sound is mono, so it makes like no real difference. Having the live audience in mind when producing. Future bass artists have long sections where there's not much rhythm, but sounds nice. Well, they go. Well, it depends what kind of act you want to be, I suppose. Like, if you're definitely making music for with an audience in mind, like that will affect your production, in my opinion. If you're just making music for maybe home listening, or you know, just kind of starting out, like I would say just go for whatever lets you enjoy it. You know, if your goal is to get played by DJs, you know, there should be a structure that you conform to. There should be elements in your song that make it feasible for playing live. But if you're just making music for the fun of it, like I wouldn't say there's any kind of structure at all. You know, just go ham. Do what you like, do what you want. Yeah. Do I have formal experience in music theory? Yeah, I studied piano for about 8 to 10 years nonstop. And after that, I just kind of kept in touch with it until I picked up music producing. And the strange thing was I don't remember using any of it in like the first 3 years, because clicking notes on a piano roll is totally different from writing music on a stave. Also in the first few years of music production, I didn't have a piano, or I didn't have a keyboard. So I wasn't able to do anything. I was just clicking stuff, and I knew what sounded right to me. For people that say you don't need music theory to make to be a producer, you know, I would disagree, because you're a music producer, you should know at least some theory in music. You know, you don't have to go full on, like, you don't have to know sight reading and all that, but at least know um, certain progressions in your key, or at least how to play some things on an instrument, because I think that definitely keeps you in touch with your sanity. Being a producer, clicking things all day can get a little bit mind numbing, especially if you're staring at something as lifeless as Ableton. So definitely playing an instrument helps. Learning to play one really helps with the fun in music, and that's what I try to do. I start every song with a chord progression. Start every song with just touching something, like playing something, because I feel like that's how people get inspired, like with different shapes, maybe different. But yeah, definitely not a need to, but you know, if you're thinking of being serious with music, you definitely would have to have some kind of music theory to, you know, be good at what you do. Yeah. Music theory is the science behind music. Yeah, I totally agree. I agree with that. But yeah, um, if that's no more questions, I think yeah, that would be the end of this little class. Hopefully, you guys learned something. If like, of course, if you have any questions still about this class, or just about music in general, just feel free to hit me up. Usually on Twitter, Instagram, and I usually reply. So yeah, I mean, back when I was starting out, I don't remember the same amount of resources available to me. So it was mostly hard. It was just watching videos on YouTube that were 360p, with this kid explaining something like how to tune an 808, and I'll be watching and I'm like, oh wow, this is cool. But now, you know, we live in such a time where it's really easy to get information about what you do and how to get good at it. So I think, you know, put in the hours, put in the work, and in time, like anyone can make a hit record. Yeah, at least that's how I see it. Yeah, it's super accessible nowadays. But yeah, I think, is everyone good? In that case, I might end the live video right here. As always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks, Defire, for setting this up. It was really cool. I recorded this, so if you weren't here and if you're watching this, yeah, just hit me up if you have any questions. Hopefully, you guys learn a thing or two, and wish you the best of luck in making music. It's a very fun journey, and of course it gets more fun with friends. So don't ever see them as your competitors or anything like that, because the industry is huge. Music is such a huge world, and I think everyone gets better if everyone shares resources and knowledge. So yeah, that's all I have for you today. Happy Phase 2, yeah. I live in Singapore. Here we're reopening, so very excited to probably take a walk or head out. But until then, see you. Thank you for tuning in. Shout out to Fire, and stay safe, everybody. See ya.